BassEdge Radio. You're listening to The Edge. Everything bass fishing, coming to you worldwide from Megaware KeelGuard Studios.
Welcome back to another episode of BassEdge Radio. Aaron, here we are, episode 363, the November 1 edition. How was your Halloween trick-or-treat escapade?
It was fantastic. The trunk-or-treat that we did for Malia. I'm on my sugar high, Kurt, so if I'm talking a little faster than normal, forgive me. But we've got a lot to talk about this morning, and part of that is, our longtime partner since day one, and that is Megaware KeelGuard. Be sure to visit KeelGuard.com, the Flex Step, the Skeg Guard, and of course the first do-it-yourself keel protector. And one of your favorites is the battery guard, Kurt. I know you probably said on those you don't necessarily use them for your batteries, but they provide cushion for most anything.
Cushion for the pushing. Hey, there's a lot of pushing going out there on those big waves in these bass boats. So happy to have my battery guards, of course. You're right. It is one of my favorite products. Aaron, we've got some new products actually going to be highlighted from Megaware here in the near future. Look forward to those coming up. We'll keep all BassEdge listeners updated on new and interesting things coming from our friends over there at Megaware. Also new and interesting, Aaron. Opens qualifications are now solidified to the Elite Series. And we talked about the Northerns last episode, I believe, right?
We did, and now I understand that the Southern and Centrals, let's just kind of dive off into it a little bit. I want to mention the Central guys, both guests on BassEdge Radio, and that was Cody Huff and Joseph Webster. Yes.
Huff, a young stallion from Ava, Missouri, the Rick Clunn friend there. Rick and Cody pretty tight, coming from the same hometown, fishing all those good rock ponds over there in your neck of the woods, Bull Shoals, Table Rock, and all those great places. Cody also fished the pro circuit when he was on the show. We talked to him about that, fishing the MLF pro circuit, but ends up points champion there in the Centrals. The Southerns, interestingly enough, a couple of highlighted names there. David Williams coming from MLF Pro Circuit, a requalifier for the Bassmaster Elite Series. David's fished the Elite Series previously, then began fishing the FLW Tour, which morphed into MLF Pro Circuit, now going back to the Elite Series. And another long-term open guy who's been, working his way to maybe one day fish the Elite Series, always kept those opens going, but also had a good run there on the Pro Circuit MLF Tour as well. And that is Josh Douglas, another BassEdge Radio previous guest. Josh is an electronics genius and guide up there at Lake Mille Lacs in Minnesota. So he's going to be making the move to the Elite Series, it looks like. And then, the overall points also solidified, Aaron, over there on Grand Lake, that last Central. Highlighted by Jacob Porosnik making the move. And a personal highlight of mine as well, Daisuke Aoki. He's a Japanese angler that's a great friend of Hayabusa's, worked with Hayabusa Japan for many, many years, started fishing the opens over here. I think it was 2 years ago he started fishing all the opens events. So check that off the box, going the elites.
Yeah, Kurt, it's very interesting because, Italy and Japan and just kind of this global influence that we're seeing and kind of the far reach of bass fishing. They've been trying that with the NFL and the NBA and things like that. And we're getting a little taste of that on our own here within the sport of fishing. One thing, Kurt, before we go to break, I just wanted to see if when we come back, we just talked about those that are kind of advancing, but perhaps I'd like to spend a little bit of time maybe in the next segment quickly talking about some changes that's coming on for those that weren't so lucky or maybe choosing not to, I should say.
Yeah, the Elite Series is going to have a little bit of change next year. We'll hit that up next segment. But before we get there, Aaron, let's pop into the tackle tip brought to you by ProtectTheHarvest.com. Y'all stay tuned. Aaron and I will be right back. This episode's ProtectTheHarvest.com tackle tip with BASS Elite Series champion Brian Schmidt.
Okay, guys, so, we're into the fall now. We have some cool-off, some major cool-off. We got, some fog on the water in the mornings. We know the fall feed's going on. And what I'm looking for here, I'm looking for areas that bass are pinning bait fish. They have the bait corralled. They're full-on assault on schools of bait, whatever your bait fish is for your particular body of water, they're keyed in on this, man. You know, the bait gives them a lot of fat, which they know they need for the winter. And, you know, you're seeing them sometimes exploding on these bait fish. You're seeing them push bait up to the surface, and you're seeing bass break the surface on bait. You'll notice that they might do this same deal in the same areas, almost on a clock, the same kind of time every day. And you know, you might say, oh man, I got to match the hatch, or, you know, I got to downsize. It looks like small bait. Sometimes they are eating big bait, and you're able to see that. But what I like doing is I like tying me on a single swim bait, and I'll do two different techniques, okay? I'll tie one on a weedless weighted belly hook. You know, I like the Hayabusa one. You know, I'll put on the biggest hook I can. I'll tie this on 20-pound fluorocarbon, and this allows me to throw it in the cover if it's grass or wood, and I'm not getting hung up. And then I'm also going to rig one up on a single open hook jig head. And what happens, guys, is just like you're seeing these fish explode and chase the bait on the surface, they are also doing this underwater, and you can't see it. And what I mean by that is on my live scope, I'm getting in the back of these pockets. There might be one little ditch in the back of the pocket. And on my live scope, I can see the bait, and I can see the bass swarming around them under the water and attacking them and schooling on them under the water. And that's where I apply the big swim bait on the jig head. I throw it out past what I see, let it hit the bottom, and slowly reel it through there. The bigger the bait, the better. What I mean by that is it's actually it's a reaction bite. They see something different than what they're feeding on. They have one option: either bite it or get out the way. And it seems like it just gets the biggest fish to bite. Also, I'm seeing them on the surface, in the grass, or on a seawall, or whatever they're pinning the bait against. They use their available cover to pin the bait. The surface is also a really good option. You know, they pin it against the surface, can't go any higher. But something on the side of like a grass edge or something, they'll pin them against that, and that's where the weedless big swim bait is applied. And these techniques, you know, I guarantee if you apply them in your body of water, they will work for you.
Awesome tip, Brian. Thank you so much for expanding that knowledge for us. Brought to you by ProtectTheHarvest.com.
First by land and now by sea. For years, Lucas Oil has been a staple in high-performance vehicles on both the road and track. Now, from the makers of Lucas Oil comes Lucas Marine products, specifically engineered for marine applications. Protect and lubricate your marine inboard, outboard, or high-performance boat with Lucas Marine Engine Oil or Lucas Synthetic-Based Oil. Learn more about the complete line of Lucas Oil and marine products. Visit lucasoil.com.
Nitro Performance Bass Boats. Get pro-level performance with the Nitro Z18, the official boat of Major League Fishing. The Z18, with its nimble handling and versatility, sports many of the features in the larger boats in the line, like a Guardian Live Well, a heavily insulated cooler, dual 8-foot rod storage, and our smooth and fast NVT hull. Every Nitro boat is laid out to do one thing very well: catch fish. Enormous front decks, up to 45 square feet on the Z21, allow maximum mobility when battling unruly bass, and feature low-profile gunnels for ease of skipping, pitching, flipping, or landing fish. Nitro Performance Bass Boats, pure fishing machines.
Kurt, it's not often that I get really excited about, a piece of tackle. But I will tell you kind of what I've seen, and then maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this. We're talking about springing for a wacky rig that happened to see on Bass Blaster. And of course, we talk a lot about Bass Blaster, but we're talking about spring, but not as in the season of spring coming, right, 2022. We're talking about something completely different, and looking forward to actually using this myself.
Yeah, man, this is a cool deal. We always talk about Bass Blaster. Jay Kumar does a great job. There's so much information. He puts out out a couple of these per week, Aaron. And one of the last several that he put out came with a cool tip that was a spring, kind of like a hitchhiker, right? The hitchhiker. Right. Hitchhiker you'd use for like a little spring for a swim bait hook, right? So you would screw it on, or some shaky heads have that little tiny spring where you screw it onto the head of the shaky head, right? So that style of spring, this comes in like a little length of this stuff. I don't know exactly how long it is. Maybe it's 6 inches, 12 inches, but it's a small spring that's a length. You take the spring and you screw it into where you would want to rig, the center of your wacky stick bait.
Kind of like the O-ring scenario of where you put the about mid-bait of where you would normally put an O-ring.
Exactly. So you take the spring, you screw it into the midsection of the bait where you put that O-ring, and you just snip it off, like with a pair of dikes. It's not really thick, but you got to snip it off. You could use your, little dike part of your needle nose or whatever. And then you just take your hook and you rig it as if you're rigging it naturally, like we did 5 or 6 years ago or 10 years ago when we used to throw baits off of our hook all the time.
Before they were $1 a bait.
Yes.
I mean, it's true.
That's what prompted all this stuff.
Right.
That's exactly right. So you thread your hook right through the spring that you've now twisted inside of the plastic. So you have all the natural things that you had, 10 years ago with that spring being in the middle. Now that spring has flexibility and movement when you set the hook and do all these things. There's nothing outside of the lure, like the rubber band type thing, the wacky tool, all that kind of stuff. So, man, I just thought this was a really neat thing. I think that there might be several applications that will come from this, but just another great little tip found on Bass Blaster. So,
well, exactly. And Kurt, I'm wondering when you say, and of course this could be a whole nother episode, but when you get into punch baits or your creature style baits, would you be able to thread that in there, in the end as your Texas rigging, right? Down through like a beaver style bait and kind of come right back out? Would that help protect, right, that top from ripping out perhaps? I think there's going to be a lot more uses for this kind of thing.
Completely agree. I think once it kind of gets into, how once more people use it, they'll have little tweaks and just like you're already quick to the punch, Aaron, and already seeing other potential possibilities for this neat little spring deal. So,
hey, one other thing before we move on, didn't mean to cut you off there, is we talked in that first segment, and I wanted to just visit on this quickly. What's your thoughts on kind of the, we talked about the open qualifiers that actually made the elites, which that's, that's very big move for them, but there's some that didn't. You got any feedback on that?
Yeah, of course. You got your typical in and out. You got a few guys moving from the pro circuit and MLF side to the Bass Pro Tour, and all the Bass Pro Tour guys are staying still this year. No movement really there. But with the Elite Series, you've got a lot of movement this year. They fished about 100 anglers this year, and now they're reducing the field back to a slightly smaller, about 90 anglers is their goal. I think with a couple Legends exemptions, a couple hardships, they're going to end up with about 94 anglers. So that does mean, Aaron, that a few names that people are accustomed to seeing out there on the Elite Series are going to be on the outside looking in. Just to name a few that look like they're going to be on that outside looking in. No official word yet from Bass on the field as of yet. Of course, you won't get that until everybody pays up, right? That's when you
Show
get
me the money.
Man, it looks like a guy like Rick Morris, who was in the Elite Series for a long time and then requalified and been in the Elite Series for the last 5-6 years. Again, looks like he's going to be on the outside looking in. Fan favorite, Chris Grow. Chris Grove's got a great social media following. Chris had a rough couple years, so it looks like he's going to move into a different realm, whether he fishes the Opens or Toyotas or MLF Pro Circuit or something. We don't know yet, but that's going to be another angler that looks like he's going to be outside looking in on this Elite Series deal. And then another one that's had a lot of success, Aaron, is Kelly J. Yeah. Kelly J's had a tough couple years. So that's just a couple that look like they're on the outside looking in. There's going to be probably 15, maybe close to 20 anglers, 15 or so anglers that are moved off of the Elite Series, 15 to 20, and making room for those 12 new open anglers, and then also that slight reduction in the field. So some big movement there with the Bassmaster side on the Elite Series. Of course, this all coming into effect, Aaron, after mayhem erupted. As everybody, all longtime fans of bass fishing know, mayhem erupted in, I think it was 2019, with the involvement of the Bass Pro Tour and a lot of the Elite Series anglers moving to that new MLF style of format and organization. So still seeing some after effects, a little bit of this ripple effect going on. But it's going to be interesting now. Things again, as we mentioned, several years ago, it would take a few years for things to settle out. Starting to see that now. You're starting to see that settle out.
And I think it'll be, that is going to bring some new life perhaps to the circuits. But, man, that's some pressure, when you think about it. Having to kind of protect yourself and stay within that realm or that division, if you will. It's hard enough catching a fish and trying to cash a paycheck, but then just to be able to stay within kind of the, that number of getting automatic acceptance or a berth back into it. That's a whole different level, You
had to be in the top 65 to get a basic requalification to the Elite Series for 2022. And that was over a couple year average of people's Angler of the Year finish. But being in the top 65 of 100, that's pretty significant.
Let's see if I'm sure you have somebody on queue ready to tell us how to get in the top 65% of our fishing realm, whether we fish tournaments or not. So looking forward to that.
I have not been in my top 65 over the last couple of years. It's been a rough go.
Well, my season finished like the St. Louis Cardinals, made the championship and then fell flat on my face. So let's not even talk about that. We're looking forward. We're looking to 2022 now.
You got it. All right, Aaron. Well, what we're going to look forward to is talking to an angler that has been on an absolute tear in the month of October. Y'all stay tuned. We're going to have a Opens champion with us next, right here on BassEdge Radio with the Lucas Oil Angler Spotlight. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
I'm FLW Tour Pro Luke Duncan. I'm professional angler Keith Poche. This is 2019 Bassmaster Classic qualifier Jared Littner.
This is BASS Elite Series angler Seth Fighter.
This is Facts of Fishing host Dave Mercer, and you're listening to Bass Edge Radio.
You know the importance of protecting your investments, so why use anything else other than the original and toughest DIY keel protector for your boat, Megaware KeelGuard. Grinding sand, abrasive rocks, and concrete ramps are no match for our exclusive contoured edge and patented technology. Megaware KeelGuard keel protectors are made tough and made to stick. Their do-it-yourself installation takes less than an hour, providing the longest-lasting, most dependable keel protection for your boat, guaranteed for life. Developed specifically by boat builders offering the best keel protection in the industry. Also from Megaware KeelGuard, Skeg Guard, Flex Step Pro, and Pontoon Guard. So give your boat the performance edge. Put on the protection the pros pick. Megaware KeelGuard.
Aaron, one of this fall's hottest pro anglers, is here for this episode's Lucas Oil Angler Spotlight. Maybe it's because he's a shallow water angler from Louisiana. Maybe because he was able to put in some extra practice days. I'm not really sure yet, but we're going to find out how pro angler Nick LeBrun dominated the final two BASS Opens this past fall as we welcome back to another episode of Bass Edge Radio. Thanks for being with us today, Nick.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. Super excited.
Well, I would think, Nick, given the October that you had, you are probably on cloud nine for the entire month of October. What a October to remember. A BASS Open second place finish on Smith Lake, an open win on Grand Lake with a ticket to the 2022 Bassmaster Classic. Congratulations. And, you got to spill the tea here. What in the world has gotten into you in the month of October?
Cloud nine's an understatement. It's more like cloud 975 and a half. Man, it all started with bombing at Pickwick. I know that's kind of a weird way to look at it, but I finished in the triple digits at Pickwick in the first Open, and I knew that took me out of contention for the points and an elite invite. So I told my family, I said, well, hey, I'm just going to swing for the fence and try to fish to win and get a classic qualification. And, man, it worked out. So sometimes a triple-digit finish can change your perspective on things and make you swing a little bit harder.
Absolutely. It certainly did in this case, Nick. We've talked about fall fishing strategies, September episodes, October episodes. Now, you have put it to work, your strategies in October, fishing in the fall. Moving right now, our November 1 episode. What has been, the strategies and patterns that has worked so well for you this past month?
It's kind of a pretty broad array, because at Smith, yes, I did have a few good ones in my bag from day one on a buzzbait, just slinging a B&M J-Bug on the back of it, little Hayabusa trailer hook, covering water. But then the whole rest of the tournament, I was out deep, 100 foot of water, using Lowrance after target, vertical fishing, dropping on fish, a V&M drop shad on a little Hayabusa ball head. So it was kind of like one extreme to the other for that tournament. Now with Grand, it was all one rod, one bait, all braid, just committed, and that's really what I like to do. I wish I could have done that at Smith, but the power fishing thing it didn't last after day one with all the pressure, I think.
Well, Nick, when you're running these type of fall patterns, how do you weigh, I guess, the risk versus reward? Is it a constant or really an all or nothing strategy in the fall season?
I was really surprised that I was able to win with the big plopper pattern, big topwater on Grand, because so many times, like me and my friend Marcus Sikora have talked about numerous times, that plopper is a good way to get 3 fish for like 10 pounds. And you never get 4 and 5, or you can't get 15 fish on it over 3 days. But man, if you can make it work for 3 days, you're going to be at the top. And that's what I love about fishing that way. So it is high risk and high reward, because, fishing like that, you really got to commit to it. It's not something with power fishing, not just a big topwater, but any kind of power fishing. In my opinion, you got to lock that rod in your hand, and there's no turning back. You can't throw it for an hour and then say, okay, well, I'm gonna go throw a wacky worm now for a little bit. Like, you've really got to commit to it mentally and physically. And man, I love doing that, and it's really bittersweet when it works out.
Nick, you've opened a lot of doors right here in our first couple questions, and now we're going to break these doors down, right? We're going to dive deep into the lures, the strategies, and techniques that were effective for you. Let's first start with the Smith Lake event, right? We often talk in the fall about bait, and obviously when you're working your forward-facing sonars, you mentioned, in the previous question, it's probably a bait-oriented situation. When you talk about early in the tournament at Smith Lake, some buzz bait action, it's probably a little bit more of taking advantage of some low light conditions. Maybe it sounds like. Let's talk about first, that buzz bait scenario. What style of banks? We often hear about backs of pockets and following the bait this time of year. What was successful in getting an understanding of where those buzzbait bites were going to occur for you?
Oh, man, that's a tough one on Smith. I'll definitely be able to give you more of a detailed answer on Grand, but on Smith, I don't really know, Kurt. It was just put it in your hand and make 732 casts and you get a bite. And some of those might be on a lay down on rock. Some of them might be on just, a straight transition rock type bank. Some of them might be back behind a dock, under a cable. It was really just random and just keep it in your hand and cover water. And maybe that's why I didn't catch them on that particular pattern on day two. Probably the best guy in that field, Jesse Wiggins, told me after the tournament, he said, man, it's very rare that they bite that buzzbait on day two. Us locals really don't know why. But I'm like, well, you're right, because I threw it for 3 hours the first morning, the first time on day two, and I never had a fish on it. And so, I don't know, maybe there was some kind of secret bank composition, but I never could get dialed in on that. My strategy was just take off and make as many casts as you could throughout the day.
Did it seem like a back of pocket deal, secondary points? Did you find any key there, or was it literally drop the troller at the front of an area and just fish the main lake, the secondary point, the back of the pocket, keep the troller on 8, and just, hope there's one that you're going to buzz it across of?
Yeah, I had 3 keepers in my bag on day 1 that come on the buzz bait, and one of them was on a straight up rock bank that was on the main river, really main lake oriented. But boat was sitting in 30 foot, you throwing up to the bank. One keeper was in the back of a pocket on wood, and another keeper was behind a dock, skipped it under a cable under the walkway.
All right.
So that's 3 totally different.
Yeah.
The wood fish and the dock fish were largemouth, and the straight up rock deeper main lake fish was a big spot. So dude, it was just, you never knew. And me and Tom Frink talked about that. He was the buzzbait man in that tournament, and he said you just never know. It's just, you cover water, and every time you get a bite, you're surprised.
Did it seem like that was just an early morning deal? Was that part of the key for that then?
I would say so, because we had a fog delay on day 1, and I was a late number. Or no, I was a pretty early. Let me think about that. Yeah, I think I was a late number on day 1, so I didn't start fishing until after 9 o'clock with the fog delay. I caught a 3.5 pound largemouth on it, and that 3 pound spot like from 9 to 10 o'clock. So those 2 big bites were key, and they were early. Now, I did cull late in the day. That was probably, 3 o'clock or so. But I feel like the bigger fish on the top water were early.
So then you transitioned into this kind of active target scenario that you mentioned earlier. Bait oriented, middle of pockets, main lake. How did that come into play for you?
Yeah, so I had found a section of the lake that wasn't far from takeoff that I'd found a ton of bait and a ton of stripers. And from what I've been told, when you find the stripers on a lake that has herring, the big spots are going to be with them. And that held true. So while I'd be throwing the buzz bait, every couple of minutes, I would just kind of scan out there and just kind of keep them honest and be noticing, wow, there's a ton of bait right here outside this little pocket. And let me spend a minute or 2, looking around. And by doing that, it really helped me dial in where there were some big schools at. And they weren't per se just like staying in one little spot. They would roam in a couple 100-yard area.
Right.
And so when things got tough on day 2 and they didn't bite the buzzbait, I just had to go to one of those schools and chase them around till I had 12 pounds.
Right. You talked about the lure that you were using. Are you just kind of casting this through fish that you see on active target, or casting it just through bait? Are you specifically identifying specific fish that you're targeting on that forward-facing sonar? Yeah,
a lot of times out there, 60 and 80 foot, it would be hard to decipher the stripers from the spots. But once you got up, more in that 40-foot range, give or take, you could definitely kind of tell how the fish were positioned and how they were swimming. And if you saw 6 or 7 fish that were up high in the water column they're spread out in a line, like they're following each other, that would be spots. And you'd really have to make sure that, you'd have to spend a second and figure out what way they're swimming, what direction they're swimming. And you'd have to kind of cast where you think they're going to be at in the next 10 seconds. And so you'd have to kind of lead them and marry your bait and the fish together on screen. And 9 times out of 10, every one of them in the school would run up there real fast and look at it and follow it all the way back to the boat and then just never bite it. But every once in a while, you'd make that cast, and one of them would just run up there and absolutely smoke it like he's never seen a bait before in his life. So I don't know what was up with that. I never could figure that out. Talking to Cody Huff, who was doing a lot of that kind of fishing, it was mind-boggling that What makes some of those fish bite and some don't, I don't know. But you just got to throw out enough of them to figure out which ones will bite.
That's super interesting, Nick. What did the stripers look like? You know, you talked about how the spots kind of, you were able to identify them. You know, when I see stripers typically on my 2D or down scan, they're kind of in this crazy S format, right? You know, they're kind of up and down in the water column pretty rapidly. Do you see the same thing when you're viewing them so long on the active target scenario as well?
To me, at Smith, the stripers, once you got close enough to them, you know, in that 40-foot range, you could see them swimming more of in a segmented, like wobbly type way. The spots would just be kind of a constant blip on the screen. You really couldn't see the segment of their body because they're so short and fat, where the stripers are more elongated. And you could tell the striper on the screen because he looked like almost like 3D, like he was kind of like a jointed, broken tail minnow jerkbait.
Like a swim bait. Right.
Yeah. It looked like a big giant S-Waver 250 in the water.
I remember, you know, when we were fished that pro circuit event on Erie, which was really kind of the first year that, you know, the whole forward-facing sonar just got ridiculous, you know. Yeah. And guys were Lawrence didn't have one yet, so I wasn't fishing one. I had played with you know, a friend's Garmin and stuff, but I didn't have one in that particular event. But anglers were telling me they could tell the difference between a drum and a smallmouth once they really started dialing in what those fish were looking like on that forward-facing sonar, similar to what you're talking about here. So great advancement as far as that.
Yeah, it just like with anything, I mean, I'm sure crappie fishermen will tell you the same thing. If you spend enough time staring at that screen and learning your equipment, I mean, you're going to be able to differentiate between species. You know, it's hard to do and it takes a lot of screen time, but, you know, it is possible. And I don't doubt those guys are dialing in drum versus smallmouth. I haven't done that yet. You know, kind of like you, I haven't really fished a northern smallmouth event besides the St. Lawrence this past season, but I'm anxious to get more experience up north with it.
Yeah, good stuff there. Nick, I wanted to kind of, before we head to break, I want to get your thoughts. It's interesting when you bring that up about distinguishing between, you know, species and kind of looking at the spots following in a line. I remember our last episode, Jimmy Washam, he more or less went through of talking about angry bait. Anytime you see the angry bait down there, it's that means something's about to go down. I'm curious for you to kind of walk us through, if you can, now the whole Grand scenario and Grand situation.
Well, Grand, I was a lot more dialed in, and I feel like I wasn't just like randomly fishing and just like, you know, living on a hope and a prayer. Like Smith, I mean, Smith was like just by the seat of my pants, really. And it shows. I got second, you know. I mean, Jacob was a lot more dialed in, obviously, but at Grand was different. So I had a tough practice at Grand. Fished a day and a half, hadn't really done a whole lot. And, you know, talking to some other pros, I knew that it was tough. But one thing that is in the back of my mind and a game plan I had going in up there was to just put a plopper in my hand and try to make it work. And so one afternoon I decided, hey, I'm going to put on the plopper, I'm going to put on the 110 loon color, and I'm just going to throw it for a couple hours and just see. And lo and behold, I had about a bite every 45 minutes to an hour that afternoon. And had a couple of big ones. I had a 5-pounder at that point. I've been in those treble hooks. You never want to take a treble off. You always want to bend it in or cut it. But and I started shaking some big blow-ups off that thing. It was super windy all through practice. The next day, I really got dialed in more of what I needed to be looking for. And in my opinion, that was a couple of mixture of things. You had to have areas where the big gizzard shad were on the bank. And for those of you that don't know, a big gizzard shad is those big shad that are like, you know, 5 to 10 inches long. They're real dark colored on Grand, and they have a forked tail. And where a threadfin shad is like you see a bunch of shad that's like 1,000 of them in a little dinner table size area. But the gizzard shad, you pull up and drop your trolling motor, and you'd see them dart in several different directions. You'd see like a big V across the water. That's a gizzard shad. And you'd have to find an area that had a gizzard shad on the bank. And then also it would have to be main lake related. If you had a little short, small 200-yard pocket that's right off the, deep 100-foot water, that was key. And if that pocket had just a few docks in it, I mean, that was almost a given. The two biggest bites I had in the event come off of the areas like that I just described. It would just be a single short little pocket with maybe a dock or two, and had the gizzard shad. And a lot of the bigger bites I had were coming back behind the dock, over the top of cables, under the walkway, that sort of thing. And so
you think that was just that type of cast you were making, just less pressure because it was tougher to get your lure back there? Do you think that's what made that particularly effective?
Yeah, probably so. Anytime that you have a field of 200 boats, you got to make some casts that your average guy is not making. Now, the thing with a Bass Open, I mean, there's 100 guys that are not average. I mean, they're stout, awesome, elite field type guys.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, though, it's time consuming, getting back behind a dock, making a few casts over the cable, getting hung up, getting it unhung, putting your trolling motor on high, zooming that ghost around the front of the dock on 100, getting back around the other side of the dock, doing the same thing, and doing that over and over throughout the day.
Well, Nick, and I think your description there, I just want to quickly point out a good friend of mine, and we've fished together a lot, Chris Bonk, who's done had a very good season. Lake of the Ozarks, very similar to Grand with the docks. He and I talked a lot about, dock fishing, and exactly, of course, Marcus has done exactly what, used the technique that you've just described there quite a bit, of pitching under those walkways and that with either a buzzbait or a whopper plopper, things like that. But when we kind of break it down, we kind of almost feel like, and I'm like your opinion on this, that people give up on it just because it is so arduous. I mean, it takes time. It's hard to cover a lot of water because you're looking for very specific areas, or they're not easy cast. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and just to be from a sphere of transparency, it's not fun.
No.
It's man, it seems like you're trolling a mile to make two casts, and then trolling another mile to make two casts, and man, it's hard on your boat. I mean, those cables, and let's just be honest, you can have all the game plan in your mind when I get bit on this cable, here's what I'm going to do to get the fish in the boat. But when you get that blow up, all that's out the window, and it's total chaos of just trying to rush up there and get that fish in your hands, and it's not fun. It's a tedious way to fish. But again, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, it's high risk and high reward. If you can make it happen for 3 days, you're going to be hard to beat.
Nick, you talked a little bit about, weather conditions, and I read also some, kind of cool, and then it kind of warmed up through practice. Even though the winds, were a little strong coming out of the south, things turned around to the north. You had some cooler temperatures for the actual event days. What was the water temperature there? First, that's my first question. Kind of what did you see water temperatures doing?
I saw 67 to 72. And I really didn't see much fluctuation, even with all that wind change and temperature change. It seemed to hold pretty steady. The night before day one, we had a pretty good cold front that moved through, but it moved through late enough where the fish still bit at daylight. And I had 2 fish for 8 pounds in the first 20 minutes of fishing that morning. So that was key. A lot of times if those fronts move through pretty early in the night, the fish will already be locked down at daylight. But that wasn't the case. And so I was real thankful for that. But, you had to have some kind of wind, whether it be north or south or whatever, but just wind in general was a huge key in this event. And I heard some other top 10 anglers say that as well. The windier, the better, because that would really position those fish just inside those pockets that I'm talking about. If it was super windy, you could almost guarantee that first dock that's a little bit out of the wind was going to have a fish on it.
Great stuff right there, Nick. We got to take a quick break in the action, and we're going to power pull down. Everyone stay right here. More Bass Edge Radio after this short message with pro angler Nick LeBrun.
Patented in 2000, perfected over years of testing and real-world punishment, the Power Pole is the ultimate shallow water boat positioning tool. Swift, PowerPole deploys in seconds from anywhere in your boat. Virtually silent, PowerPole won't spook wary fish. Secure in strong current or gusting winds in up to 8 feet of water. Engineered to take it with a lifetime unconditional replacement guarantee on the spike. PowerPole, swift, silent, secure. Visit PowerPole.com to find a dealer near you.
BassEdge presented in part by Mercury Marine. Go boldly, returning with MLF Pro Circuit angler Nick LeBrun in the Lucas Oil Angler Spotlight. That's right, Lucas Oil high-performance marine products. Be sure to visit the BassEdge.com store for free shipping on all Lucas products. It works.
Nick, before the break, we started breaking down some water temperatures and that event there at Grand Lake that you just recently won. Really, temps hadn't fallen quickly, down into that mid to low 60s range when you really see a lot more fall activity, even into the high 50s, right? Fish are pretty fired up and they're really starting to feed up for the winter time. You and I both live, a little farther south than Aaron does and much of the nation, quite frankly. So to get to the high 50s, low 50s for us is pretty significant. Whereas up north, it's obviously more prevalent and much sooner in the fall transition process. Even right now, in early November, you've got anglers up in New York and Ohio and even down into Illinois, North Carolina, starting to see those temps really start to decline. What success that you've had this fall will help you in a continued transition to stay with fish as these cooler temps rolling into the 50s begin to approach in much of the nation?
Well, for me, the past two events have really brought to light following the bait, no matter if that's herring or gizzard shad or thread fin or whatever. Right. But you always read that in the magazines and the websites and the user's guide of bass fishing, if there is one.
Right.
But these past two events really were a light bulb moment for me. And both events, I was around the bait. I was dialed in. I was seeing the bait with my eyes, seeing the bait with active target, and just kind of following the fish and make sure that I was on productive water. So I'm really hoping I can take that momentum of being dialed in and connected to the bait and just, implement that more and more as it gets cooler temps. But there's also some environmental things and some equipment things that we can do. When some of these cold fronts start rolling in, and I saw this on Grand, you're going to have some fish that just don't want to, come up and crush it, or just they don't want to choke it, whatever you're throwing. And for me with that plopper, it's real important that I would change out those treble hooks to a Hayabusa TBL 930 size 2, because some of those fish that would just come up there and headbutt it, I'd catch them anyway, either on the side of the face or on the top of the forehead. And I actually had a fish on live that I showed the camera. I'm like, hey, see, this is what I'm talking about. This fish tried to come up there and just mess with me, but I caught him anyway and weighed him in on the final day. So when the fish get finicky, sometimes a good sharp NRB coated treble hook is just, it's worth its weight in gold. It really is.
How does speed play in a factor in all this? How fast you're actually moving the bait across the surface of the water from that earlier time of year, like you had at Grand, where that water temperature was still kind of transitioning into that cooler faller temperature to, as temps get into the low 60s and high 50s. How does that affect, in both scenarios, your speed of retrieve and how that plays a factor for you?
So there's kind of a fine line, here in Louisiana on grass lakes and, just fall fishing in general. When you have water that's still, 58, 60 degrees, you're not going to outswim them. I mean, you can reel it as fast as you want, whether it be a rattle trap or a chatterbait or a swim bait even. I mean, sometimes they want that bait just smoking through there. But it's kind of funny because after you've had a few cold fronts more and you get down more towards that 55 to 57 range, sometimes you got to beg them to bite. And, like with a trap, I still use a high-speed reel, but I crawl it. But it's so weird because once you get that first bite, it just fires them up, and then you can throw in there and just any retrieve, any speed. But a lot of times to trigger those fall schools that are shallow, grass related fish, you've kind of got to beg them, multiple casts, slow retrieve. But once you catch one or two of them, it's on. But, so we welcome that 58 to 62 range. But once it gets a little lower than that, we kind of got to look at it a little bit differently and think outside the box sometimes here in my region.
Nick, let's transition a little bit into, you brought up, electronics. I'm curious to get your thoughts, and Kurt, please jump in on this as well. Have you noticed or found limitations, up shallow concerning the forward-facing sonar? Or are you finding that it can be, just as effective in shallow as what it can be using it kind of out in the depths?
To me, it's just as effective. And I had a light bulb moment on Lake Eufaula this year when we were there for Pro Circuit. When was that, Kurt? Was that like May, April or something?
Yeah, it was May. Yeah, it was
okay.
May, kind of in that early summer transition. Shad spawn was going on a little bit here and there, and it was post spawn, but not summer doldrums yet at all. But yeah, it was in that May time frame.
Yeah, so I was fishing shallow and deep in that event, but when I was shallow fishing some docks, I just happened to have my active target on, and I shined it up there toward the dock, and my boat was sitting in about 5 foot of water, and I was kind of shining it at a 45-degree angle toward the bank and toward the dock. And near the dock, I could see some dock pilings of the walkway, but there was a stump or something down there, and I could see a fish above that stump and some shimmering fry above the fish. So I actually saw a fry garter on active target. So that kind of opened my eyes of like, wow, like this thing does work in 5 foot of water. Is it as clear and is it as easy to make out? No. Obviously, the deeper the water you're in, the better it works. But don't discount it when you're 10 foot or less, because it will reveal some stuff to you, especially in muddier water. When you can't see visually with your eyes, it will reveal some stuff that's there. So that was pretty cool.
Nick, I completely have seen some of the same things that you're seeing as far as that forward-facing sonar up shallow. It's a totally different view, and you kind of got to look for some different type of activity on the unit, right? I mean, a lot of times they're just not as clear and as bald, as they are out deep, but you start seeing some flashing and some flickering out there, and a lot of times that's
We're still
the
talking about
telltale.
electronics here, Kurt, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
all right. Just making sure. Just making sure.
Not your Saturday night dance fever.
Okay.
No. This is still electronics. So, but yes, I would completely agree. Anglers need to kind of have that light bulb moment, as you mentioned, Nick. And I've had a few myself. Not saying that I'm all dialed up on the forward-facing sonar in less than 5 feet, but there's definitely some very interesting ways to utilize that process and make it work for you, even up shallow, as good as it is out deep. But Nick, how late in the year can you continue feeling confident to find schools of fish that are actively feeding on shad that you're targeting with your electronics? You get into December or January, are you still finding these, you call them like dinner table size, shad balls of threadfin, or seeing those gizzards kind of cruising up shallow? And are you still targeting that, as the year progresses that late, or is that something that you find kind of starts to fizzle out at some point?
I think it's as late as you want it to be. It depends on what lake you're on, and I think you always have fish that are gizzard eaters. You have fish that are threadfin eaters, and some both probably. But I can recall a Bassmaster Team Championship on Guntersville in 2015-ish, and me and my partner Randy Deaver had a deep school in like 20 foot of water. Had 28 pounds on the second day. Now that was obviously not forward-facing sonar fish back in the day, but those fish were definitely shad related. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Right.
And, deep cranking or, a 3/4 ounce swim bait. Love throwing a Hayabusa Power Delta for stuff like that. But it's as late as you want it to be.
Nick, I could not agree.
In the South.
I could not agree more. I mean, even like on some of the White River Lakes, Table Rock, Bull Shoals and that, I mean, it's like we didn't really start getting excited until December rolled around. And then you kind of find those, those schools of bait, and you can stick with those fish from December all the way up into, spawn. They're just out there on them. So good point.
Yep, that's right.
Nick, going to bring us full circle back to your success on the Opens. Has it prompted you to, I guess, feel more confident going into the new MLF Pro Circuit season, and how will you plan to, I guess, kind of build on or use that momentum, gained this fall and carry it over?
Absolutely. Like I was joking with a friend of mine on the way home. I'm like, man, I wish I could just go find another tournament and fish right now. Cause in this sport, momentum is everything. And when you can, harness that and bottle that up and bring it down the road to another event that's not too far off, man, it means everything. And, for example, Smith Lake to Grand Lake, those tournaments were about a week apart. Okay. So I've just got to find a way to kind of stay on this cloud 972 and implement that, hopefully at Rayburn in January. Cause, man, I'm really excited about that lake and the whole entire schedule for next year, and as well as the Central Opens. I don't want to wish time away. I've got a wife and 3 little kids that I feel like I sacrifice a lot of missing out on stuff, but 2022 cannot hurry up and get here sooner. From a fisherman, pro angler standpoint.
Sure. Makes complete sense to me. You want to ride the train while it's trucking. Ain't no doubt about it. Nick, we're going to move into our Nitro Performance Bass Boats listener question segment. This question comes in from the BassEdge Instagram page. Ike Alexander, a.k.a. Launchin' Salaunches from Washington State. Ike asked this question, if you could help answer it for him. I'm from the Northwest and winter is close approaching. Ike would like to know what techniques you might recommend for catching bass as they head deep and get more lethargic.
Okay. If he's in the Northwest, I mean, his water temp's probably like 28 degrees probably. But just, I'm going to give an answer for just cold water. And cold water in Louisiana is different from Washington State, right? But whenever the bass get lethargic and they don't want to do a whole lot, the key is just making sure you're presenting your bait to them and directly on them. Forward-facing sonar is going to help with that. But when I think of like begging a fish to bite, I think of vertical fishing like I was doing at Smith Lake. Little lightweight, maybe a 3/16 Hayabusa FPJ head, V&M drop shad, and maybe 8-pound Sunline SC Sniper fluoro, fishing out a spinning reel with mainline braid and just begging that fish to bite. And anytime you're vertical fishing, you want to make sure that bait is a few feet above that fish's head. It seems to me like when you get it right there trying to like force it in their mouth, that's not natural to them. But I would get on your forward-facing sonar, hold that little vertical bait a few feet above their head, and just play around with some retrieves. Hold it still. Don't play with it at all. And then maybe just try barely tapping your rod with your fingertips. Maybe move it up and down. Maybe, kind of pulsate it. But in my opinion, if that doesn't catch them out deep when they're lethargic, I don't really know what will. That's some of the most finessey type stuff you can do. And you combine that with forward facing, I think you're going to be successful.
Yeah, Nick, I think you bring up a great point just to kind of add on that, because I think you're spot on. One of the techniques that we would always use would be even combine that maybe with a hair jig if it gets really, really tough, of using that same deal to where that kind of that mylar on that hair floats around. If the water's deep enough, we would often kind of yank a spoon in front of them too. So I think this forward-facing sonar, as we head in and more people understand it, I do believe it's going to be a game changer for this kind of fishing as well.
No doubt.
Nick, certainly appreciate you taking Ike's question. And Ike, thanks for sending that in done, but we do need another piece of information from you and another action, and that is to log on to BassEdge.com, click on the Claim Your Prize tab, fill out the information, and we will get the BassEdge gift sent directly to you.
And as a reminder, keep shooting those questions into the Instagram page, or go log on to the BassEdge.com website, hit the Ask the Pro tab, and fill out the little form. We'll get your questions answered right here on the show. There's an easier way to do that too. You can just hit us up on our social media or shoot us an email, support@BassEdge.com. So look forward to seeing all those questions sent in by the listeners.
Well, Nick, I know it's been a little bit since we had you on the last time, but it was certainly a welcome presence back, and to kind of hear just how that magical October came about for you, and certainly are looking to kind of follow you into 2022. There's no reason why you cannot, ride that momentum, and certainly we will be cheering you on. But as we continue with the show, any final thoughts before we let you go and have your day back?
I would just say put God first. Without him, I wouldn't be able to have done anything in October. He gave me the strength, and so especially young people, put God first, and there's no reason why you can't be doing what I'm doing someday.
Great stuff, Nick. Always on the top of the list, no doubt about it. And it's always fun chatting, fishing with you. Look forward to seeing you around next year on the road. Bass Edge Nation, don't go away. Aaron and I are going to return in just a moment.
You know the importance of protecting your investments, so why use anything else other than the original and toughest DIY keel protector for your boat, Megaware KeelGuard. Grinding sand, abrasive rocks, and concrete ramps are no match for our exclusive contoured edge and patented technology. Megaware KeelGuard keel protectors are made tough and made to stick. Their do-it-yourself installation takes less than an hour, providing the longest-lasting, most dependable keel protection for your boat, guaranteed for life. Developed specifically by boat builders offering the best keel protection in the industry. Also from Megaware KeelGuard, Skeg Guard, Flex Step Pro, and Pontoon Guard. So give your boat the performance edge. Put on the protection the pros pick. Megaware KeelGuard. Be at home with nature with nature-inspired art, decor, and gifts by Wild Wings at wildwings.com. Explore art prints and canvas wraps of bass, trout, walleye, muskie, and more by acclaimed artists like Mark Cicino.
I primarily paint underwater scenes of game fish, and usually in a fishing situation, going after prey or going after a lure or a fly. I get asked sometimes whether I like fishing better or artwork. It would be tough to give either of them up. I can't really think of a good reason to give either up, so I'm going to stick with them.
Make your home, office, or cabin show off your passion for angling. Visit wildwings.com/BassEdge and sign up for an exclusive offer to Bass Edge listeners of 10% off your next order. Give something special to your loved one and be at home with nature. Visit wildwings.com/BassEdge. That's wildwings.com/BassEdge to get 10% off your next order of nature-inspired art, decor, and gifts by Wild Wings.
The PowerPole Charge Marine Power Management Station is the most advanced system of its kind available on the market. It does the work of 3 devices, a traditional battery charger, a charge on the run, and an emergency start system, all in one compact unit. The Charge lets you run your boat's accessories the way you want to run them by allowing you to monitor and control your power usage through the PowerPole app. It automatically devotes power to the batteries that need it the most for maximum efficiency. The new Charge from PowerPole. Power where you need it, power how you need it, power when you need it.
Well, Nick was a returning guest, but brought a whole another, I guess, added layer, if you will, Kurt. I don't know, maybe that's not the fair way to say it, but just a very thorough interview, and I really appreciated kind of the contrast between, the two lakes, and then also just his breakdown as we head into to winter here.
Yeah. Some new things that we didn't chat about in the last several episodes, kind of prepping and all of us working on our game for fall fishing. The gizzard shad thing, that's something that has really come to light. Still backs of pockets. Not necessarily way backs in the creeks. And I think a part of that for Nick was just because water temps hadn't really gotten down to that point yet. Although, fall fishing is in effect at present, it's still not totally fired up here in the mid section of the country and specifically in the south of the country as well. It's still got some cooling to do, right? And I think a lot of times in the fall, we do the same thing in the spring. We kind of push those fish shallower than they really are, in that time of year. And we want to push fish shallower now than they are yet too. The best fishing, Aaron, still to come here as November and early December progresses. So it's time to get out on the lake. And what a better time than to utilize all the great information we've been able to extract from anglers over the last several episodes here on BassEdge Radio.
Could not agree more. My rule of thumb in Missouri and the areas that I fish is kind of tabled around Missouri deer season, which is always about that middle part of November. I think that's when the bass fishing really starts heating up. And right. The other thing is, like you said it during the interview, it's nice to have, versus talking in theory. We actually had somebody on the show that won a lot of money, did extremely well using the very conditions and tactics that he talked about.
We've been discussing.
That's right. So anyway, just a reminder, we've got to close down, Kurt. We are out of time, but just want to thank yourself, obviously, for being at the mic and putting the show together, but also our listeners as they have many opportunities out there. As you begin to look downfield, we have Christmas out there. Don't be alarmed by the supply chain and shipping and all of that. So make sure that you're starting to look at your Christmas list and kind of get out in front of that. And certainly there's a lot of things on BassEdge.com that can be had for perusing there at BassEdge.com. Keep sending in those questions. But in the meantime, Kurt and I look forward to seeing you November 15th for another great episode of Bass Edge Radio. For Kurt Dove, I am Aaron Martin. So long, everybody.
The Edge is presented by Megaware KeelGuard. For more information on Bass Edge or to shop at the Bass Edge online store, visit BassEdge.com. And be sure to join Kurt Dove and Aaron Martin right here on another episode of The Edge. Brought to you in part by Nitro Boats, Lucas Oil, ProtectTheHarvest.com, Mercury Marine, Power Pole, and